Times News at 7, I'm Matthew Schofield. The police watchdog is to investigate whether officers racially discriminate against ethnic minorities. The Independent Office for Police Conduct is focusing on a series of incidents in London. It's claimed officers used excessive force and in some cases tasers against black men. Police are 9 times more likely to stop and search black people than white people. Leroy Logan, who's a former Met superintendent and a founder member of the Black Police Association, says senior officers need to acknowledge that there's a problem.
Systemic failure to stop and search is indicative of an institutional racist organisation, and they want to do something about it. And don't undermine people's intelligence by saying, oh, everything's okay, there's not a problem. Because the experience of certain people in the black community is that they're over-policed and under-protected.
From today, people arriving in the UK from more than 60 countries no longer have to self-isolate for 2 weeks. The rule's been relaxed to allow British holidaymakers to get some sun and overseas tourists to visit this country. Tim Hawkins from the company that runs Stansted Airport says people have responded to the easing of the restrictions by starting to book more flights.
We're seeing probably around a quarter of the normal number of passengers and services at our airports at the moment. We were at the sort of the tightest quarantine, I suppose, in the UK, seeing around 5% of passenger numbers, so we are on the up.
The Foreign Office is still advising against going on cruises, and the World Health Organization's warned coronavirus isn't under control in most of the world. In fact, it's getting worse. Charities are calling for relatives of care home residents with dementia to be treated as key workers so they can be tested regularly for COVID-19 and visit safely. Dementia UK and the Alzheimer's Society are among a number of organisations that say visits are essential for residents' mental and physical well-being. The Health Secretary Maggie Hawkes promised new guidance on visits to care homes soon. Rosie saw her mum recently for the first time in months and was shocked by her decline.
She was slumped over in a wheelchair. I was worried about her, to be honest. It took me a long time to get her to respond to me. I think there's been quite a rapid change to how she sees herself since I last saw her.
A probationary Met Police officer from North London has been charged with being a member of a banned neo-Nazi group. Benjamin Hanna, who's 20 years, also accused of possessing indecent and prohibited images of children. Scotland Yard says he's been suspended from duty. Detectives investigating the fatal stabbing of a teenager in Sydenham on Wednesday night have named him as Donnell Rule. They believe the 18-year-old was attacked in Lisle Row but managed to make his way to a parade of shops in Seeley Drive where he was found. No one's been arrested. It's emerged a schoolgirl from London played a part in the RAF's victory in the Battle of Britain, which began 80 years ago today. 13-year-old Hazel Hill and her dad worked together on the calculations that allowed Spitfires and Hurricanes to have 8 rather than 4 machine guns, dramatically increasing their firepower. Hazel's son Richard Baker says it was extraordinary to uncover her story.
This can't be true. This is crazy. I mean, it seems crazy that a 13-year-old should be assisting the RAF in working out how it should arm its fighters for the next war. This can't be right.
Meanwhile, Dame Vera Lynn will be honoured with a Spitfire fly past over the village in East Sussex where she lived later ahead of her funeral. The singer who entertained troops during visits to the front line in the Second World War died last month at the age of 103. Jose Mourinho says not being awarded an early penalty was a defining moment in Tottenham's goals streak. Failed to rule a spot kick and the VAR failed to intervene. It's another setback for Spurs' hopes of playing more next season.
It's a team that is very defensive and is really trying to play for points. You have a big occasion to break them. You have a big occasion in the beginning of the game to score a goal and to be in front. And of course the game would be totally different. But if you ask me, am I frustrated with the remaining minutes of the game? Yeah.
Elsewhere, Manchester United boosted their chances of a top 4 finish with a 3-0 win at Aston Villa. Tonight on Digital, we're live at Craven Cottage where Fulham could put more pressure on the Championship leaders with victory over Cardiff City. Now Elizabeth Rizzini's here with London's weather.
Cloudy and a temporary storm today also cloudy with cloudy set clouds where southeast winds very windy. We can see sunny skies in much of the west and it should stay dry. There's a noticeable northwesterly wind blowing in the with an pressure that has been temperatures between 19 and 20 degrees Celsius. The night tonight, Mexico stands
which direction approaching 25. They've both been cleared away and things should be easing. Elsewhere for the M25, still looking very heavy. Clockwise junction 5 at Seven Oaks, round towards the roadworks at Clackett Lane Services. Brixton Hill still reports it's partially blocked southbound at Acre Lane due to an accident. And a reminder, the A46 still down to 1 lane westbound between Brightons 5 and Staples Corner because of the burst water main on Monday. No major problems reporting the trains or tubes. BBC Radio London travel on half an hour.
Thanks for serving.
Very good morning to you. This is BBC Radio London's Breakfast Show, and it's Petrie here with you until 10 o'clock this Friday, the 10th of July. Coming up this morning, Twin Brothers all here in London have paid a visit to two different countries in the Caribbean. Despite never having been there, they're both organising a comeback and face being removed from this country when their police with relatives and the men's laws surely. Once you've heard the story, now there is a lot to it. Okay, it's a bit complicated. It's easy to have a knee-jerk reaction. But have a listen to all the facts. And I want you to know, if you think these men should face being moved to another country, then although they should be allowed to stay, we should recognise them as ours. 0800-731-2000. Also this morning, there was another announcement about lockdown yesterday. It means outdoor concerts and theatre performances can start again from tomorrow, and outdoor swimming pools are renewable. In 2 weeks' time, you'll be able to go to an indoor pool and a gym. And from Monday, this coming Monday, politicians are touting this time Italian salads can get back to work. Is that what you've been waiting for? My feet, they will cheer this morning. Last night, actually, when we had that news, I'm desperate for a bit of it. What about you? 731-2000. Text 81333 London Front, or you can email me, bbc.co.uk.
BBC Radio London Breakfast.
0800-731-2000. Twin brothers who were born in London probably face a big different countries in the areas they never ever visited. This is from James Woods from previous families of 24-year-old Darren and Daniel say they've been issued with deportation notifications and probably plans when they're released. Their families are aware that they're British and that Britain is their home. Britain has been towards their
Good morning, Petrie. So 24-year-old twin brothers Darrell and Daniel Robert were born in Ealing Hospital 24 years ago to parents from the Caribbean islands of Dominica and Grenada. Now, neither mum or dad had British citizenship. Now, they went on to go to nursery and school here. Things were going all right for them, and the twins were quite popular. They were very popular at school, being twin boys. They were quite cheeky chappies, quite popular as well. And ultimately, they get to 13 years of age, and their mum dies of cancer. They're then sent to live with their uncle. Unfortunately, he later dies a year later from cancer. So the two boys are then placed in the care of Ealing Social Services. Now, they're moved around to a number of different foster homes and then start getting into trouble, kind of falling off the rails at about 15, 16. Now, one of the brothers, Darrell, is involved in an incident, an assault on another young person, and is convicted.
and big up yourself to make a difference. But also, if you could do some help yourself, we can point you in the right direction at least. You can drop us an email, makeadifference.london@bbc.co.uk, and of course you can give us a call 0800 731 2000.
BBC Radio London.
Make a difference.
Thanks, Bill, and a very good morning to you. This is Petrie here on BBC Radio London's Breakfast Show. But we're talking about this story of twin brothers who were born here in London, who are currently facing potential deportation to different countries in the Caribbean, places that they've never visited. The boys, now men, 24 years old, Darren and Darren Roberts, both currently serving prison sentences, and the intention to deport, that is, at least has been seen by Greg McKenzie for one of the brothers, although the Home Office say they don't intend to do so. Well, look, let's try and pick through this. This is quite a complicated case. On the face of it, it seems quite simple. Joining me now is Bella Saint from Detention Action. Good morning, Bella.
Morning, Petrie.
Now, why is it that if you're born that doesn't instantly make you a British citizen?
It's a really good question, and I think it's something that a lot of people don't appreciate. I think lots of people do think that if you're born in the UK, you automatically acquire citizenship. That is not the case if both of your parents are not UK citizens. And I think that's a law that really needs to be re-examined, particularly in the context of these cases that we're now seeing, because I think most people would agree, and actually we conducted some polling on this very issue last month, which found that 78% of the British public feel that if you're born in the UK, even if you do receive a criminal custodial sentence at some point, you shouldn't be automatically subject to deportation by the Home Office, which is what's going on in the case of these twins. It clearly is pretty illogical. It doesn't make sense, but unfortunately, because the way our citizenship laws are, and because we have these very over-the-top deportation laws that make deportation mandatory if someone gets a 12-month sentence, you're seeing more and more of these grossly unfair cases.
When you have a baby here, is it my son was born sort of accidentally in Germany, right? But so I found out that then, I mean, I had no intention to stay in Germany. I was working at the time. That the child takes on the citizenship of the mother. Is that the case here in Britain? That if as a child is born here, he or she takes on the citizenship of the mother?
Yes, that can be the case. It's a really complex area of law, so it will be very dependent on individual circumstances. But the case with these twins is that neither parent was a British citizenship, and it was a British citizen, and it remains the case that if you're born in the UK but neither of your parents is a British citizen, you are not automatically acquiring British citizenship. You have to jump through several hoops. It's a very expensive process as well, which means that for many families it's just unaffordable to make their children British citizens, or they can only naturalise, say, one or two of their children because the fees are so high. So there's lots of reasons why it may not happen, as in the case of Daryl and Darren. And the real problem is that you've got thousands of kids who really spend all their lives in the UK. They're either born here or they're brought here at a young age. That's another category of case that we see a lot. They have no links with the country that the Home Office then tries to deport them to. Kids that have been here since they were in nappies, since they were 6 months, 1, 2 years old, have been entirely in our system, like nursery, primary school and so on. And then they suddenly get to their 20s or 30s and they're facing this really cruel double punishment, because let's remember that these are people that will have served their sentence for the crime that's been committed, but this is a double punishment, and it's a worse punishment. So many of our clients will say that of course they accept they need to serve a prison sentence and they need to repay their debt to society, but being permanently separated from your children, potentially, as in one of the cases here, your partner, your wider family, everything you've ever known, for many is just completely unimaginable, and it's effectively a death sentence for some. We know of cases where people just have not survived when they've been deported to a country that they have no connection with. They're often very vulnerable. They can be preyed upon as a result, and you get incredibly tragic outcomes.
There will be those listening, Bella, of course, that will say, well, don't break the law then. If you're not a British citizen and you're in this country, and you don't want to be chucked out, you don't want to be deported, then don't break the law. There's very little sympathy for somebody who, in Darrell's case, ending up in a prison for GBH for 6 years. There will be lots of people who think, oh no, we don't want to.
Of course, that no one condones law breaking. I don't think anyone for a second should say, would say that if someone commits an offence, they shouldn't face, punishment and the other things that our system provides. One of which, of course, is rehabilitation. Now, we've always been a country, or for a very long time, we've been a country that does believe in rehabilitation and second chances, and not sort of forever condemning somebody for the worst thing that they've done, the biggest mistake that they've made. And I think part of the problem with the immigration system at the moment is it doesn't recognise the scope for rehabilitation. So that's completely kind of written out of the rules, and it means that even in cases where somebody has been rehabilitated, has taken complete ownership for what they've done, and has expressed remorse, has served their sentence, and whatever else, that's not taken into account at all. And so it means that we're really sort of saying, for certain people, we don't believe they deserve a second chance, and we are condemning them forever. And I think that's what people find really unfair. And you have to remember that it's not just the individual that's punished by this law. One of the twins has a baby daughter who is facing permanent separation from her father for something that she had nothing to do with. So she's being punished. And we see that in so many cases. The law was actually changed by Theresa May in 2014 to make it much harder to stay in the UK, even if you have 1, 2, 3, 4 children that you have a really close parental relationship. Even in cases where you're essentially the primary carer, you can be ripped from your child's life. After serving a sentence.
Again, Bella, to victimise some of these people who have themselves left victims in their wake. If setting aside these 2 boys that were born here, or these 2 men that were born here, if it's a foreign national criminal who has had no thought for the victims that they've created, ending up in jail and then suddenly remorseful and saying, no, I'll change my ways, it is hardly surprising, is it, that there will be a lot of people who say, no, too late, mate, they're tough. So what if you've got 4 kids? You shouldn't, especially with 4 kids, you shouldn't have broken the law in the first place. So there is a real difference here, isn't there, between somebody who was born here and somebody who is here and then breaks the law.
I think you're absolutely right, Petri, to say that all of these cases are going to be different, and the important thing, I think, is that there's discretion in the system. So
you want nuance.
So the facts can be taken into account. I wouldn't argue for a second that someone arrives in the UK very recently, goes about committing offences, shouldn't be punished by the criminal justice system, thrown into jail, do their sentence, and then deported when they're released. Of course, there are going to be cases where that is entirely appropriate, but